Was Martin Luther King Jr. right? Does love have the power to transform an enemy into a friend? We're currently working on a documentary showcasing people doing extraordinary things, such as loving those who are most hurtful. In this documentary, we'll showcase extraordinary stories of forgiveness, reconciliation, and transformation. If you'd like to find out more about our documentary, go to www.maitrecentre.com/documentary. Hello and welcome to the Love and Compassion podcast with Giselle. We believe that love and compassion have the power to heal our lives and our world. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing content. Today we're talking with Larry Rosen about whether enemies can come together in dialogue. Larry is the founder of a mediation law practice through understanding, and he has helped thousands craft enduring solutions to crippling conflicts. Millions have watched this popular TEDx talk, The Secret to Understanding Humans, whose insights informs The Enemy's Project. In 2024, Larry completed writing the novel, The Enemy Dance, posing the question, must a society riven by tribalism descend into war, or can it heal itself? Larry is a graduate of UCLA School of Law, where he served as editor of the Law Review and received numerous academic awards. Growing up, Larry was both the bully and the bullied, the one who was cruel and the one who was kind. He was sometimes popular and sometimes friendless. He had many fistfights with kids who became his friends. He had his very own chair at the principal's office. He believes that his peacemaking today is born out of the callousness and empathy that he knew as childhood. Please join me in welcoming Larry. Hi, Larry.
Hi there. It's funny because that last piece that you read about the principal's office, that's on my website. I've never had someone read that back to me, and it brought me a little bit to tears, like, oh, that poor kid. Yeah, I don't hear that very often. So anyway,
Yeah.
good
I
morning.
really loved it when I saw it, and I could relate to it because I've also been both. When we hurt other people, we want to be forgiven, but when people hurt us, you don't always want to forgive, right?
Mhm.
It gives you the different perspective. I'm so thrilled to have you on the show. And how I actually came to know about your project is so I'm a professor at a university and I teach research and ethics. And what I had discovered about my students is that many of them don't come with the ability to do the critical thinking, to be able to hold both sides. Many of them come thinking, there's got to be a right answer and there's a right way of doing things. Just tell us what the answer is. And so for my students, I get them to write a paper where they tell me the things they feel really strongly about. And then they're researching the opposing perspective using credible sources because trolls are easy to dismiss, right? So credible sources, the opposing perspective. And then they are supposed to, so tell me what are their main points, like why do they believe what they do? And are you really that different? Right. And then the last part of the paper is talk about the emotions you feel. And throughout the year, I prepare them in terms of being able to handle it. So I teach them mindfulness, I teach them self compassion so that they can hold, because it's really difficult to hold an opposing perspective of
What
something. It feels
class is this?
it's research and ethics. I do it for because one of my research interests is compassion. And I was a director of one of the departments I had was HR. And what I noticed was when people had conflict, it was the inability to regulate themselves to sit in a conversation that prevented them from going anywhere.
Hmm.
And so what I do in my class is like I'll do like a minute, like maybe 5 minutes, 3 minutes right before the start of class. I'll teach mindfulness or like a self-compassion practice. And we talk about it all year. And then at the end of the year, they'll do a paper where they do the opposing perspective. And then at the end, they talk about the emotions they feel. So, and they can do that through music. They could do that through a photograph. They could do that through an art project, or they just use text. They say, oh, I felt this, I felt that. And so it was in my students researching for their papers that they encountered your project. And they were
Hmm.
blown away. They were so, so happy about it. And I've watched the episodes, they're amazing. And so that's why I wanted to have you on the show. And so I was wondering if you could start by telling the audience a little bit about the Enemies Project and how you got inspired to do this work.
Yeah, so the Enemies Project is a docu-series where I bring together people who are essentially enemies, people of really dramatically different viewpoints who pretty much don't like each other. And so an example is a trans woman and a woman who is MAGA who believes trans people belong in mental institutions, a Palestinian and a Zionist Jew, and lots of other combinations. And the goal is not to debate. There are lots of places where you can see debates, and I allow them to argue it out for a few minutes to show what doesn't work. And then I bring them through kind of a different process where they understand each other deeply, which basically means live in each other's viewpoint, really ultimately be able to, like you're trying to do in your class as well, have them express each other's viewpoint. And that is a transforming process for them usually when they do it in each other's presence. And it has hiccups, which is part of the process, but it goes really deep. And so ultimately, these people who hate each other end up almost always saying, I really admire you. I like you. I would be your friend. And sometimes they say, I love you. And usually they hug and there's deep affection for each other at the end. And they're saying to the camera or to, their viewers, like, please be kind to this person. This person's now my friend. And that is, for me, important because, like you probably, and probably most of your listeners, I'm tired of what's happening in society. I am tired of being manipulated. I think we're all being manipulated by what I call enemy makers, people who profit from division financially, politically. They're usually political leaders and media leaders and we're all being taken. And the big lie at the center of it is that people on the other side, ordinary people on the other side, are bad, are evil. That's the dark heart lie at the center of it. And if we believe that, we'll follow these leaders. We'll follow them because we all want to defeat evil. We all must defeat evil. And so, what I'm trying to do in this project is unravel that lie by showing that people on the other side are just us and
Yeah.
they too have been manipulated and we've been manipulated and it's gone well, it's gone really well. There have been we've done 8 or 9 episodes and we have in various forms of media been seen tens of millions of times in the last 5 months. And we have, I think, 175,000 followers on different media. And the comments are just really, from my perspective, surprisingly kind of off the chart. It's powerful. Like this has changed tens of thousands of comments of just this is in sometimes I cried throughout, or it's actually changed my life. I see people differently. So it's really great to have that feedback, and then we have plans for the future, which I can tell you about later. But
Yeah.
that's the basic background. The reason I got into it, I don't know if you have kids, but for me, kids are the great motivator. The next generation, probably people who don't have kids also are motivated for the next generation as well. I care deeply about what I'm leaving my kids and other people's kids. They all touch my heart, and I feel really terrible about the mess we're leaving them in, and I feel terrible about what humanity is inheriting, and so I want to have an influence on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things I love about your docuseries is that the intent isn't to change anyone's mind. The intent is for people to feel heard and seen. And that is so, so powerful. It makes me think of Daryl Davis about how he went. Do you know the story of Daryl Davis?
I
Black
don't.
jazz musician. So he's a black jazz musician who, since he was little, he wondered why people were racist. So what he did was actually go to KKK rallies and speak
Oh
to
yeah,
KKK
I
leaders. Yeah,
have heard. Yeah,
yeah. He didn't mean to change anyone. He just wanted to offer them respect, which you say is fundamental, and just wanted to understand. And in that understanding, he created those conditions that led people to change. And so I think that's the same thing that your docu-series is
ab-
offering. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, you can see
Mhm.
it so easily that
Yeah.
as soon as one person hears the other person, the person who is heard is the one who changes. You don't change the other person by telling them your story and by convincing them of anything. It's when you hear them and hear what their true intention has been and what's going on in their life, that's when they change. It's the fastest road to their change, really. But if you go in with that objective, then they won't change. So there's kind of an irony or a paradox embedded in this. But usually both people move toward each other is what happens. Yeah.
I want the audience to understand how brilliant this is. Because I don't know if you know DJ Khan, she's a documentarian and she interviewed people from the KKK. And one of the things she noticed in all those interviews was that many people hate others, the people that they've never met. They've never met people in that group, but they hate them. And
Yeah.
so,
That's really
so
interesting just
yeah,
to hear
so
that. Yeah.
yeah. So how does the Enemies Project help challenge misconceptions about groups that have never met each other, carry beliefs about the other?
Well, so far it really hasn't because everybody who we've done a show with has met people from the other side.
Oh, okay.
It's not like because thus far, with I think one or two exceptions, everyone's been an American. So in the United States, everybody's going to meet somebody else. They're not friends with them. They're not deeply connected with them. But from my perspective, it it doesn't matter. You can be from the most different tribes who've never met each other. We're all going to be the same. The process never differs. We don't start with politics. My view is that starting with politics, which is how some people who try to bring others together to find common ground start with politics. And that's not going to work. What I start with is rapport. As soon as you start with something that a person is defensive over, they're going to be wearing armor and they're going to try to defeat the other person. So we exit that process and we really just help them understand what's beautiful in each other's lives, what's challenging in each other's lives. And there's no question that as soon as you see what's beautiful in someone else's life or challenging, you're going to identify with it because you're going to have very similar points of beauty and challenge yourself. And then we fold politics into it about why politics really are important to the other person. And we do it in a way where it's a true exploration. And once that happens, people connect deeply. So it doesn't matter in my experience, how different the people are, how extreme the people are. You're going to be able to bring them together. And so if they haven't met each other, it's really interesting what you said that people hate people they haven't met, which is like such a obvious statement, and it is really profound just to hear that. Like it's so absurd. And I would say that in my experience, the most profound or the deepest sessions are with people who are really dramatically surprised that the other person's a human being. So if they haven't met each other, if they haven't met someone like that, it's going to be an easy one because
Yeah.
because the shock is going to be so huge and
Hmm.
so full. It's when the people have had experiences with the other side that it's still powerful, but it can be a little bit more intellectual than in the heart because when you're shocked by someone's humanity because you couldn't imagine it at all, it really crushes your thoughts about them.
What I love about the process is that that's the part you really focus on. You masterfully like are able to get people to really get to the root of their humanity and make that connection and then re-engage in a dialogue, which is amazing. So how are individuals selected and what support needs to happen before they can engage in the dialogue? And I ask that because each individual has to be able to hold the discussion because sometimes it can feel so hurtful. And I'm thinking in particular of even Nancy. So they've got to be able to regulate enough to stay in the dialogue. Otherwise, what I have seen is people will eject, they'll fight, they'll just kind of flee. So what preparation needs to happen and how do you select people?
So on the selection front, it's different now than when I started. When I started filming about a year ago, I didn't have any choices. It
Yeah.
wasn't like anyone knew who I was or they had seen my shows. So I would live in the Bay Area, and it's really hard to find conservatives in the Bay Area, but all the conservatives in the San Francisco Bay Area congregate. They have like clubs. And so I would
Mhm.
go on hikes in conservative clubs and I would speak to them and I just would try to find people who were interested. There were no criteria beyond that. Now, having said that, it's not entirely true. I did interview some people who I just were like, they're too intellectual. They just wanted to talk about economic issues or stuff, something like that. And then for liberals, it was actually harder, believe it or not, to find people in the Bay Area who wanted to participate. I could find tons of liberals and progressives, but they had zero interest in speaking to a conservative person. And I wasn't sure if that was a Bay Area phenomena because liberals are so much in the majority, they don't really care to speak to the other side, whereas the other side wants to be heard, or whether that's a progressive kind of liberal thing. I have my views that have developed over time, but it was hard to find liberal people. And so, really, at the beginning, it was just people who were willing to do it. There weren't criteria beyond that. At this point, we've received some that people know what we're doing and people want to be on the show, and we receive applications. And my daughter, who runs this with me, my daughter Sadie, who's 20 years old and in college, she is the person who finds people now. And you might have seen the episode, A White Cop and a Black Activist. I don't know if you've seen that one, but she found those two people and they were great. And the way she found them is she searched them up on the internet. It's a little different now because by searching people on the internet, we find people who have a little bit of an audience, and that could be a
Mm,
bit of a problem. But it's also like so much less time consuming for us. And so, if we had a lot of money, we would spend more money on casting, but we don't. And so, but
mm,
we were able to find pretty good people. I'd say the main criteria for me, in addition to them having to have some passion about this particular show that they're on, whether it's about abortion or Israel, Gaza, the main criteria for me that's developed is, do I want to hang out with this person? Because if I do, if the person, not whether they're nice, okay, not whether they're kind, that's not it. I want them to have passion and I want to like them personally. Because
mm,
it's not that I don't like some of the people, I like them all, but I don't want to hang out with them. If I do, it's going to be a great show because I know that they're going to be dynamic people and that their passion will flip. They're going to connect in some
mm,
way. And people who are really cordial and kind, they're not going to connect as deeply. The transformation is not going to be as powerful for them or for the
mm,
audience.
mm. Really interesting. I want to touch base on something you said, like that most people listen to debate. And I like Valerie Carr's perspective, which is to listen to understand is to be willing to change your mind and heart. And I also like what you said, which is listening is to love someone. Can you explain what you mean by that?
I think it more is it's received as love than necessarily it's given as love. It doesn't mean that you love the other person when you're listening, but all of us, I would say, if we think of the people that we believe love us the most, they get
Yeah.
us. We receive it that way, and they
Yeah.
don't judge us. And so when an enemy does that for you, the thought that they are a bad person melts away. Because if somebody loves us, and that's the way it's received, it's not really an intellectual thing. We just receive it that way. They can't be a bad person. Like somebody who loves me cannot be a bad person. And so it's probably the most powerful thing that you can do to flip the feeling of the other side is to listen to them, not to convince them of anything, and to listen to them with curiosity, not just kind of blankly, to listen to them without judgment. That's a real critical
Yeah.
piece. And if you do, you can see on the show, it's just like you can see the switch flip. It's really interesting. You can almost watch when it happens. And all of a sudden, the person likes the other person, and now they're listening to each other. It was really interesting. I was on a show. One of the episodes is called, I forget what it's called. It's the Guns episode, How to Stop the Bleed or something. It was these two women. And one of them has a podcast that she had me on. And she said what was really interesting to her was that given how the show was laid out, like the first part of the show, they're arguing like you usually do in a debate and they don't really hear each other. But she said, given how the show was laid out, she was not preparing her responses in her mind like she always does when speaking to somebody else. She was not thinking about what she was going to say. Her job in her mind was to understand the other person, to really get the other person. She said it was a total shift in the way she was acting internally. And
Mm,
she said she noticed it. Like, I am not even thinking about what I'm going to say. And then she said afterwards she thought a lot about it, and that was a dramatic shift from anything she's been involved with. And that's another way to put it. I didn't think of that when, that the people wouldn't be preparing for their response like we usually do. But that is definitely what happens when you concentrate on listening. And so, yeah, it's
Yeah.
received really warmly and it's transforming.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it has to do with how you manage the conversations, right? Like the tools that you use. I notice they use the who am I, right? To try to get people to go down to their core level, to talk about themselves, the whole flipping side identity confusion, which we'll talk about in a minute. So are these based on particular frameworks that you use to mediate conversations since you have a history of mediation, or is this something that you sort of came up on your own?
It is something that I came up with on my own for the most part. I mean, I do a type of mediation in the law. I'm a lawyer where it's unusual because I'm doing like a personal mediation in a legal context. It's kind of weird for people.
Yeah.
But I only do the types of mediations where people know each other. Like I don't do
Mhm.
between two companies because there's not really a human element to it.
Yeah.
It really is about money for the most part. But when it's two human beings, the money is a proxy for something else always.
Mhm.
And so I'm used to being able to connect people. I do, divorce, founders of companies, neighbors, family members who are caring for another family member, people who where there wouldn't be a legal issue if their relationship wasn't broken. And so they already know each other. I don't have to do that really deep rapport building. I do have to do some, but not really deep. But my theory was that when starting this project, which is mostly political and people who don't know each other, that there would be a piece missing. Like I wasn't sure if what I do would work, what I do with clients would work in this political context. And I wanted to know, my thought was, how do I build that rapport? Even if it's
Mm.
broken in the personal relationship, like they're craving that. They want that
Yeah.
healing. But here, like they don't know the other person. So it was really just me thinking about how do I powerful things that I want to know about other people. And
Yeah.
so I really just tried it. I mean, like, what would I most powerfully want from another person? And I developed a list of questions that really worked well. But I'm really practiced in keeping people focused on the questions at hand and not allowing them to
Mm.
deviate from what it is that I've designed. So that's something that, I've been doing for 20 years, and it takes some skill to even know whether the person's deviating, whether they're sneaking in their own judgment, or they're asking a question, but it's really designed to convince the other person. So I'm good at detecting that from a fair amount of experience, and I've developed skills in how I can reel them back in without triggering them.
Yeah. Yeah, I've watched it. Like you're very good at navigating people back, and it's very soft and very humane. Can I just bring you back here? So there's no like judgment or minimizing of what they say. They're just like, well, can I just get you back on this track? It's very beautiful how you do that.
Thank you.
Um,
And you asked how I prepare people. It's interesting because what I do is I interview them for an hour and a half to see if they're a match for the show, an hour and a half to 2 hours. And I get to know them during that. And me asking all these questions gets them liking me, right? The
mm,
same process happens between
yeah,
us.
yeah.
Um,
Smart.
and then before the show, I spend another hour with them. Again, it's over video. I've never met these people in person. Just preparing them for what's going to happen, what my objectives are, helping them understand that we're going to start with conflict. It's not where we're going to go. Just really helping them understand the trajectory and answering their questions. And so they come in with some level of rapport for me. It's not like we know each other really well. So a lot of times it's just us starting together, but they do trust me to some extent. There's no like, and you said, how do I get them to regulate? I don't. There's no preparation for that. It's just that
Mm.
from so much experience with this, thousands of conversations with people over the years, it's easy to get a person to calm down. which is, you just take a break from the other person to say, hold on a second, I'm going to listen to you. And then they calm
Yeah.
down. And those skills, the whole identity confusion and the layout of the questions, that's kind of my stuff. But the skills that I use are not mine. I've developed them over the years, but a lot of them come from nonviolent communication and
Mhm.
Marshall Rosenberg. And I got my first training in nonviolent communication probably 25 years ago. But I remember well the person saying, you're moderating a conversation between two people, you apply emergency first aid because one
Mm.
person can't hear, and you as
Yeah.
the intermediary can apply that, and it becomes quite easy, with that thought in mind that I can heal in the moment whatever's going on.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I want to talk a little bit about the flipping side because I think it's so, so important. Why do you get people with opposing perspectives to flip sides and then just reiterate the viewpoints from their perspective? I know sometimes it can be confusing to the people themselves, but why do you get them to flip sides?
Yeah, so it might be helpful to view it through, a real example. Let's take Eve and Nancy, which is, a really powerful episode for
Yeah.
your listeners who haven't watched or heard any of these. Eve is a transgender woman, fully transitioned. Nancy is what she called a gender fundamentalist. She's wearing a MAGA hat. She comes in and she's saying stuff like people who are trans belong in mental institutions. She tells Eve to her face that you're a genetically modified man. Eve is saying, you people don't have empathy for other people. They're really far apart, let's just say.
Yeah.
It's not gone well. Eve is very empathetic, however. Like she is unusually empathetic and able to hear Nancy, and that is transforming for Nancy. I mean, I can't express the degree to which Eve's own nature and intention transformed this. I helped, but it is an unbelievable example of me listening to you will transform you. And where I take them ultimately is I'm preparing them as they're understanding each other for switching roles. Because what happens when we switch roles, I mean, my thought is that human beings can easily, it might be weird to this point, but we often say you can walk in the shoes of another person. How is that even possible if you think about it? We have totally different upbringings. How can you experience what another person experiences if we have totally different upbringings, different philosophies? Like, how is that possible? And yet almost everybody can do it. And it's because we have the same internal machinery. We have the same internal drives. We just have different ways of achieving them. And so if you can slowly build your understanding of a person's history and their beliefs, like a belief might be that there is Christ who is love and will save me. That's a belief. If you identify the person's history and their beliefs and you occupy that belief, you can understand why it's important to them. If you have that, why would that
Yeah.
be? Well, it's important to me now if I really believe that because I want to live forever. I can be with the people I love forever. I can help save other people. Like, can there be anything more powerful than saving somebody's soul? Like, once you enter their belief, and the reason we're able to do that is because we are the same internally, we have the same desires. So, the whole show is a buildup toward getting them to understand each other's beliefs and experience and then occupy them. And once we do, and we start advocating on the other person's behalf, we become confused who we are. And
Yeah.
that's really powerful. Like, I don't even know who I am, and I'm doing this legitimately. Like, I'm totally advocating for you. I'm saying stuff you didn't even say.
Yeah.
And then you're listening to me do that, and you're
Yeah.
blown away. Like, you've
Yeah.
never been heard so deeply, and particularly not by someone you consider an enemy. And so
Mhm.
that is transforming. What I will say is that I use this process a lot in mediation for a different reason. My mediations are not meant to repair relationships. This is meant to repair relationships. My mediations are meant to solve issues.
Mm.
In this show, I specifically tell them you are not here to solve the issues. Like, how are they going to solve the Palestine-Israel issue,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's too
Exactly.
big of a burden, and no one's going to listen to them. The
Mhm.
goal is to show the audience that people should not be enemies, that they're the same people on the other side. That's my goal. So I try to keep them away from solution seeking because they will be disappointed, people won't listen to them, and things could fall apart. And it's not the point of the show. But what's interesting is that in my mediations, I use this tool of having them switch identities to solve issues. Because once they do occupy the other person's perspective fully, they are then solving the issue because they understand at an internal level the other person and what drives them, and they have no resistance to that, and they understand themselves. They all already understand themselves. And so during that process, solutions emerge because they've never been able to hold both perspectives at the same time. And I heard you say that when we were opening the show. I don't remember what the context was about holding both perspectives at the same time, but you said that's something that you do.
Yes.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So when students are taught research or even like thinking about ethical considerations, right? When you're doing research, you've got to be able to hold differing perspectives, understand differing views, understand research that might invalidate your perspectives, right? And so if you come already into the conversation thinking that there's a right way or there's a right perspective, and I heard you say this in your TEDx talk, I think you were talking about like, we can only win if we defeat the other side. That perspective that there's only one side, one perspective prevents us then from engaging in dialogue and holding opposing views.
And the holding the opposing views, in my mind, is not an intellectual process. Like you might think that if I list all the desires and the goals on both in our spreadsheet, then I'll be able to solve it. No chance.
Yeah.
It's not a conscious intellectual process. It's when you get it both sides deeply without resistance that your subconscious produces solutions. So we don't consciously produce solutions. And what I found is that that is the most powerful tool to bring people to solutions where they are themselves and the other person at the same time, where both people are doing this. And then one person just suggests something that never occurred to any of us, and it solves it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, that doesn't
It's
happen in the show because I'm specifically telling them not to seek solutions, but it does happen in mediation.
yeah. And what you're doing is so fundamental too. Sometimes it's not even about finding a solution. Sometimes it's even just about finding the humanity in each other. And that is such a great beginning. You know, people want to solve war. Yeah, of course, we all want to eliminate war, but sometimes there's war within families, with neighbors. So why are we worried about the larger war where we're not even able to engage and hold space for each other's humanity within our homes? And so I think what you're inviting people to do is, can we sit with each other in dialogue without the need to change each other, just with respect, which you've mentioned is fundamental, and just with presence, just remembering each other's humanity. And I think that's so fundamental.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to also mention, you know, one of the things that I noticed in the conversations is how you focus people on disarming. And one of the ways that you to get them to disarm is to take their uniforms off. Can you talk about a little bit about how uniforms show up in these conversations?
Yeah. Some people come with like a MAGA hat or a pin or bracelets or something like that that show which side they're on. And I don't discourage that. It's part of the process for the audience from my perspective, because at a certain point, if they do come that way, I ask them not to wear a shirt that they can't take off, but they might wear a hat. And when they do take that off eventually, when we stop the argument, when we stop the debate portion and we enter into another portion of the discussion, you can see the effect on the other person. And you can even see the effect on the person who took, like, the most dramatic is Nancy.
Yeah,
Nancy is
that's the
wearing
one I
a
was thinking.
MAGA hat. Yeah. And then she puts on, Nancy is from Kenya, and she puts on a Kenyan headdress because her
Oh,
hair
so
is a
beautiful.
little messed up from the hat. She's like, I'll put this on. And I ask her, like, wow, you look really happy when you have that on. And she's like, yeah, this is my crown. and she is almost like a different person. And uniforms basically divide. I mean, they announce to the other side essentially, I don't care about you. Whether consciously or not, it's interpreted as I will defeat you at any cost. You just don't matter. I am on this side and I will
Yeah.
crush you.
Yeah.
And when she took that off, you could really actually see the difference in her and in Eve.
Yeah, absolutely. It was truly transformative because I noticed that when she had the hat, you can even see it in the body language. There was a big protection, and she used it as a protection in terms of like, well, my group. But when she used her headdress, it was so beautiful, and it was just more her. It was just her. It wasn't all of these other people. And I think about, in the Holocaust and how people kind of got into these roles. Because, in my class, we talk about the venality of evil, right? Like how some people were hairdressers and butchers before the Holocaust. They did these roles. And then they went back to doing that after the war. And it's like, how does that make sense? And to put a uniform on, to put a role on, and then fully accept it, like you said, creates that division, creates that separation between human beings. Whereas what you're doing is you're asking them to disarm and to go back to the essence of their own humanity, which I think is really powerful. But it was really interesting, the whole discussion on uniforms, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is one of the many ways separate ourselves, we separate ourselves, that we perceive ourselves as different than them, and that they view us as a threat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I heard you say that enemies are not enemies. It's just us on the other side. What do you mean by that?
I mean the ordinary people of the enemy, I believe. Enemy makers, if you can think of who you might consider an enemy maker, they are political leaders and they are media leaders. And they wouldn't exist. They wouldn't have any power. People wouldn't vote for them. People wouldn't watch them if they didn't create an enemy, if they didn't foster the idea that there is an enemy. And the enemy has got to be broad. It can't just be one person. It's got to
Mm,
be a people that I'm fighting against. It's got to be a big
yeah,
threat. And so they paint people who are ordinary people on the other side as a threat all the time.
yeah,
And so that's the big lie at the center of it, that they're a threat. And what happens is there's this
yeah.
psychological process that the brain goes through, the mind goes through, that once we're under threat, that's a cascade that exists in every human being, and that results in us going to war with the other side once we're under threat. But this is, and us choosing a leader. But this is a very fundamental, basic process and fundamental, basic lie that autocrats and demagogues and people who just want power have been using forever with human beings, I imagine. And it's extremely powerful. And so, what I intend to show is that that is a lie.
Mm,
That is just not the truth. Because at the core of this psychological process is the thought that you're a threat to me. And then this whole cascade happens internally for me. If I no longer believe you are a threat, the cascade unwinds and the power of the enemy maker unwinds. It can all flip on that one lie. And so I want people to understand that ordinary people on the other side are just them. Like, I can't tell you how many times people on the show are just like, holy cow, yeah, I see myself in you. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm experiencing. And it's revelatory for them. Like, how could that be? Like, how could we be opposed to each other? This is crazy.
yeah, yeah. And it's amazing how when we truly understand somebody's reasons for believing what they do, their history, their beliefs, why they believe, it makes sense, right? Like I
Yeah.
saw it a lot in children in care in the child protection system. Their behaviors seem really misbehaved. They shut down, they act out. In some cases, that's how those kids survived these abusive homes, right? And so to them, they're still always on survival mode.
Yeah.
Makes sense. That's what helped them survive. And so when you understand the other person's perspective, it makes sense
Yeah.
And, as you were talking, I was thinking, what is going on for those demagogues and those authoritarian people that believe that that's the only way that they can get what they need? I
You mean
think
the
about this
leaders
a lot.
themselves? The leaders
Yes, like
themselves?
so those powerful people that are in their power, feel love, feel fulfilled, don't need to disempower others. They don't. In fact, the more that you love yourself, at least that has been my experience, the more I have compassion for myself, the more I love myself, the more I'm in that state, the less I want to hurt other people, the more I care about other people, actually. So, what is going on for them that they think that this is the only way to get their needs met?
I've thought a lot about this, because
Yeah.
the goal of this show is to show that people aren't enemies, but there are enemy makers.
Yeah.
And to
So
me,
important.
they are the enemy. Like of all of the rest of us, all of us who are just trying to exist in the world, who prefer a world where we're working together, you know,
Yeah.
it's these people on the extreme who are basically consciously sucking the goodwill out of society that couldn't care less about that because they get power.
Yeah.
So is there something different about them? Is there? I have a few conclusions. One is that there are people who are different, that they are born, all of us are born with the same internal desires, and almost all of us get pleasure from seeing other people happy. That's just born into us. Like, almost everyone who's an activist who comes onto the show, everyone actually is doing it because
Mm.
they want other people to be happy. They don't want people to experience the same pain that they've been in their life. But there are people who are born without or who have extremely dialed down the pleasure that they get, the happiness that they get from seeing other people happy and healed. It's not that the rest of us always want to see other people happy, but it's one of our greatest sources of pleasure. There are people who are born without that. We call them sociopaths. Some leaders are sociopaths. They don't, I believe, obtain
Yeah.
pleasure from other people's happiness, and they're able to manipulate us quite often very well. And it's these people who, in peacetime, we wouldn't even sit next to. We wouldn't invite them over for Thanksgiving. Those are the
Yeah.
people we
It
choose
doesn't make
when,
biological sense.
well,
Yeah.
they're the people we choose when we're at war. They are the people we choose. So think about this, okay? There is a virus, and the virus will kill 95% of human beings. And you have a leader who says, there's someone in power who says, we understand that people who are infected are going to infect other people. That as a society, we need to euthanize them. We
Mm.
actually need to do that as a society to save other people.
Mm.
There might be a leader who is empathetic, who says, I can't do that. That feels wrong to me. Almost all of us turn to someone else who is a tyrant.
Who's willing to
We-
do what needs to be done to save us,
Exactly.
right?
To
But
defeat evil, to kill, when there's a big enough threat, we will turn to the tyrant. And so people who are sociopaths and who in normal society would be rejected as a person who's extremely dangerous are the very people we turn to in times of war when evil needs to be defeated. And so if
mm,
you're a sociopath and you want power, there's no other way to power. You're not going to follow the route of cooperation. You're not going to follow the route of, building alliance with the other side. You're if you will go the route of creating an enemy. And so that's what
mm,
we've found in our society. There are people who rise to power who are the very people we would want nothing to do with in peacetime, and that people turn to because they believe the other side is an enemy. They believe they are the virus that will kill 95% of people. So you can think of any leader and you might say, how can people follow this person? How could they possibly, what kind of evil is in people that they would follow this person given what this person is doing? And the answer is obvious. They've been convinced that the other side is evil.
yeah.
And they truly, truly believe it.
This makes me think Hitler would have been a lone nut if 10 million people hadn't followed him, right?
Right. And
Right.
they
Right.
believed, I mean,
Yeah.
That
It's so,
Jews were an incredible danger. And they also ignored it and, wanted to get along in society and be with the
yeah.
people they cared about. But they truly believed that Jews were evil.
Yeah.
And if you can convince them of that, you can lead a people.
Yeah. So it goes to the question of like the reflexivity. Like, so what is people's own responsibility to constantly examine their own biases, beliefs, and viewpoints, right? I got to applaud the people that are on your show because they have to be willing to engage in a dialogue. So there's an element of them that is willing to be wrong, right? Or willing to kind of engage in that perspective. And we struggle so much
Yeah.
with being wrong. Like the mind always wants to be right. We want to be on the side of good. And that's one of the things that I was so reflecting on. I think I was listening to the conversation with the Proud Boy and the yeah, progressive.
That's one of
And
the
it's
episodes, by the way, for
yeah,
people who
that's
are
one of the episodes. And,
spoilers.
and I,
Yes.
I love the follow up, by the way. That was also amazing. It's so funny because I was like, oh, is there a follow up? And I like went to search for it just to see how both sides feel that they're right and on the side of good, on the side of like positive for humanity, I think was really puzzling to me. We have different ways of getting there. The people that are for Trump really truly believe that some of the stuff he's doing is very beneficial. The people that are against, they truly believe that what he's doing is horrible. And to see those perspectives that at the core of it is a love or a care about humanity was really kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, that is
Uh,
mind-blowing.
yeah.
It is mind-blowing. And what is infuriating to me is that we're manipulated to not
Mm,
pair with these other people because then these leaders
yeah.
would lose their power. It's a huge manipulation.
So this is why it's up to each of us to do that work, to do the coming together, like engaging in the conversation, even though sometimes it feels difficult. Having a willingness to listen. And that's the thing about your beautiful show, which is like you don't have to agree at the end. You just have to see each other's humanity,
Yeah,
right?
to let go of that we have to agree. That's a real
Yeah.
problem for me as
Yes.
well. Like when I get into
Mm-hmm.
a conversation with someone,
Yeah.
it's like, how do we conclude the conversation if we don't agree? It's almost like it's a forced imperative that is a mistake. Like that's the point of the conversation.
Yeah.
I've, for the most part, let go of that
Yeah.
because I see now that that was just a mistake. Like we never had to agree.
Yeah. So let's talk about then, since we're talking about disagreement, let's talk about censorship. So, because of the class that I teach, because I want them to understand different perspectives, one of the things I say in these papers is like, look, you can be pro choice or pro life. You can be pro Trump or against. I'm not judging you. That doesn't matter. The exercise is to view the other side. That's it. Right. But it's amazing how some of these dialogues in institutions have been diminished because there's the belief that if we have these conversations, we're supporting it, right? But the truth of the matter is that dialogue goes underground. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't mean like, oh, everybody now believes this. It just goes covert, right? And these dialogues about these opposing perspectives are happening. And so I think I'd rather have these conversations up and so that we can engage in dialogue and see what people are believing. I mean, there's this undercurrent of racism, it seems, from my perspective, that has existed for such a long time. It used to exist very like visually in terms of slavery, but now there is still underground racism, right? Like it's covert. People may be able to vocalize the importance of diversity, but some people don't believe it. So let's talk about it rather than kind of like try to get those people to disappear and pretend it's not there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's been a criticism that comes from the left a lot on the show from people from in comments is that we platformed bad guys.
Yeah.
Like you should not be giving a stage to a Proud Boy. Well, if you listen to the Proud Boy's perspective, this guy is like completely reasonable. From people on the left, they're even confused that he's a Proud Boy. I think he might be confused about why he's a Proud Boy. I'm not sure. He's completely reasonable. So to just reflexively reject this person, he's not there to represent the Proud Boys. He's there to
Yeah.
represent himself. And to reflexively reject this person is to miss out on really a beautiful person and an interesting perspective. I've given a lot of thought to the criticism, however, because there's a guy I'm considering having on the show who is a self-described fascist, a white supremacist. And I've had conversations with him, and it is amazing how the reason he is a white supremacist is he truly believes that white people are in danger and that he will be rejected, there will be no opportunities for them, and that he is possibly in physical danger. He truly believes this. And if I believed that, I might do the same thing. And I had a 3-hour interview with him where I really liked him, but I'm probably not going to put him on the show. And I've really thought a lot about whether to platform people. And I've kind of developed my own philosophy on whether it's worth, whether I should be airing viewpoints or not. And my thought is that a bridge goes both ways. So I can build a bridge where I walk him back. I am confident that I can have someone hear him out and him develop a relationship with them where he then becomes less extreme in his viewpoints.
I was going to say, I think you should have him on the show. This is my perspective. Okay. And again, this is so similar to what Daryl David said, right? His intent wasn't to change, it was to understand. I think if we understood why people were afraid of us or hated, I'm Latino, by the way, right? If we understood, then we could have the dialogue. The thing is, like people are giving like a one-sided propaganda, and it's true. Like if you actually hear the rhetoric of many separatist groups, it's the fear of the other. Even though when you look at the population stats, right? Even in the US, Black people make up 4%, Indigenous people make up 2% of the population. Like, I think white people make up 57% of the population of the US, and it's higher in Canada. But it's the fears, even though they might not be based on reality. That's the rhetoric that these groups use. They use the rhetoric of we're in danger, that these people are out to get us, to destroy us, that somehow it's better for us to be isolated and separated. And they use the rhetoric of belonging. They use the rhetoric of love. They co-opt it.
I don't think it's rhetoric for them. It's truth for them.
Well, okay, thank you. Yeah. So if you have people who are engaging in those different dialogues like Daryl did, people can understand why they believe that the way that they do.
Right.
And because it's real. Right now that rhetoric is happening, whether people want to face it or not.
So, so
That's
I
the
agree with
problem.
you completely. And when I first started this, I said to myself, there's no question that I'm going to have a Nazi on the show. There's no question. But as I've thought about the critique that's been offered, I've kind of drawn a line for myself, at least
And
presently.
that's fair.
But I'll tell you why. I haven't said why yet, which is a bridge goes both ways. And while I believe it's really important to hear them out, because you walk people on both sides back from the extreme toward the majority when you hear them out, because they don't
Yeah.
see people as a threat anymore as much. What happens is by building the bridge, you provide an opportunity for many people to walk out toward them. When you give them an opportunity to hear them out publicly. And my thought is that I will hear anybody out who has a large following because they already are being heard. They
Mm,
already have people walking out to them. And my goal is to bring them toward the rest of us so that we can function as a society. But I'm not going to hear somebody who's 0.1%, who's because
okay, I understand.
I can walk them back, but maybe I walk 20 people out to them and it
Mm,
creates a bigger problem. And so in my own view,
mm,
it's about how big their following is already. Even
mm,
though, yes, we can walk them back by hearing them.
Yeah. So yeah, it's so interesting. I was just thinking about DJ Khan and Daryl David's the same. And one of the things I noticed about their work is that, and I noticed it in yours too, is sometimes what happens in these sort of circumstances is that the people that they are exposed to might become the exception to the rule. Have you heard of the exception to the rule? So let's say I meet someone who's anti-Latino, but they're like, but then they like me. And so they'll do like,
Oh,
you're all right.
yeah.
I still don't like other Latinos. Right.
Right,
And so in the
right,
beginning,
right.
that used to irk me so much. Right. Then I realized after watching all of this information, and I observed it in your show and I thought about it, is that's the beginning of rehumanization.
Yeah, I agree with
Because,
that. It's like it's a
because
dial, it's not a
yeah.
switch.
Yes. And so it begins with, oh, this is the exception to the rule. And then this next person's the exception to the rule. And then this next person, and then the brain can't handle it. Like how many exceptions to the rule can there be? They couldn't hold the exception to the rule anymore. It had
Right.
to be that their belief was wrong, which is it's
Right.
really
And
interesting.
it's another interesting thing I often say, which I get negative feedback about this statement that we don't choose our beliefs. We don't have any power over them. They just
Mhm.
exist. And we can't choose not, if I think that a certain race is dangerous to me, I can't just choose not to. You can call me racist, whatever. I just can't choose my thought about it. I have an experience. People have told me things. That's my belief. That belief gets eroded. It doesn't get changed. It happens
Mhm.
not consciously. Life experiences change our beliefs. We don't just
Yeah.
suddenly love white people if we've experienced brutality from white people or from white cops.
Yeah.
You don't
Mhm.
just change your belief about it. You have to slowly be exposed. You have to, or
Yeah.
be deeply exposed. So these types of things erode our other beliefs.
Mhm.
And my goal is not, like Nancy came in, I would say, as a 9 or a 10 with her dislike for trans people. When she left, just to be clear, because people I think are mistaken about this who watch the show, she does not think still that trans people should be around kids. She still thinks it's dangerous, but she thinks trans people themselves are okay, that they can be beautiful, that they do not belong in mental institutions. And as she said, I would drink out of the same glass from you, Eve, and I
Yeah.
would protect you. So she went from a 10 to a 7, let's
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
And
And
she's
she
still
also used the
out
word
there.
she. Mhm.
Yeah, and she
Sorry,
used
go
the
ahead.
word she. And she's still out there advocating for keeping trans people away from kids. And people are like, so she's a hypocrite. No, she has moved so far. And, Eve moved toward, I shouldn't paint Nancy as the wrong one. Eve moved toward Nancy, understanding that Nancy really is worried about kids. And Nancy brought up some things that really concerned Eve when she heard it about the exposure that kids have to various concepts. I guess my point is that people who get dialed down from a 10 to a 6 or a 7 can deal with each other. They can run a society together.
Mhm.
They don't invest all of their energy in defeating the other side, which is where all of our energy is now. I call it issue
Yeah.
zero. You care about climate change, or you care about poverty, you care about mass migration, you care about nuclear proliferation, you care about AI. Forget it. None of these are getting solved. Zero,
Yeah.
unless we learn to cooperate with each other. And if we're
Mhm.
dedicating all of our energy to defeating the other side, every single one of these issues goes unaddressed. And so my goal is to dial the vitriol down so that we can actually solve some human problems so that the next generation doesn't inherit this mess that we've created.
Mm. Mm. Mhm. Mm. You once said, I may be misquoting you, so please correct me. Revenge is a need for understanding. Can you explain that further?
Yeah. I said that in my TEDx that
Mhm.
if someone has been hurt by another person, they often seek revenge. And that desire for revenge will go away actually when they're understood. If you're and you deny that you want to be understood by your enemy, you'd say, like, that is baloney. They deserve to be punished, and they need to be punished to provide disincentive for other people in society so that they don't do this terrible thing. People would deny that they want understanding from their enemy. But when they receive it, the desire for revenge goes away. I mean, I've seen that innumerable times.
So, how does the need for understanding help us live beyond the need to punish one another?
Well, I think that if someone's seeking revenge against you, if someone's trying to injure you, you can unravel that by understanding them. Whether we people agree that human beings seek revenge as a need or not, you can unravel it pretty, not easily, but you can pretty reliably. Very often, people who seek revenge against each other, like in my mediations, once they're understood by the other person, once they have some connection, they go through some kind of healing process with the other person, they don't even understand why they were seeking revenge themselves. Like they are completely transformed. They were like, that would be a total travesty of justice if you were hurt now.
Yeah. I love the fact that these conversations get at the core of human needs, which is they need to be seen, they need to be understood, they need to be loved, they need to be accepted, they need to belong. And so I think these conversations that you're facilitating get to those needs. You kind of like go through all of the fluff to get to the okay, what are the needs that need to be met? And how can we connect to one another through those needs, and then from that you go back to the conversation of the topic, and really it's about fears at the core of it, right? Like the fear that my children are going to be confused or forced into something, or the fear that somebody's going to have a say over my body and tell me that I have to do something. All of those fears are at the core, and conversations get at those needs, not at the
Yeah, and it's
surface.
not to say, I should say that it's not to say that the fears are irrational. They
Yeah.
might be rational, but it's also a self-fulfilling prophecy that if we fear somebody, they're going to think of us as a threat. We're going to do stuff that creates the world that we fear. And it's obvious with certain issues, like between two peoples, like if you fear that the other people are
Mm.
going to attack you, you might preemptively attack them, or you might treat them in a way that is really bad. And so you start this war. And that happens between human beings on an individual basis and between peoples.
Yeah.
It's less obvious with an issue, let's say abortion. My fear is not creating the issue on the other side. But many of our interactions with other human beings, it is our fear that triggers them. We
Yeah.
create the world we fear.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that goes back to the self responsibility, right? To what extent are we responsible for looking at ourselves, looking at our biases, looking at our prejudice, looking at our fear and how our fear is causing us to hurt other people? And what responsibility do we have to engage in dialogue or be willing to see somebody's humanity, right?
It's just this better strategy, even if you think of it as,
Yeah.
people sometimes say, these two sides, I get this criticism a lot. And this, by the way,
Mm.
these criticisms come from the left mostly,
Oh,
that these two sides are not equivalent.
oh,
Like, how could you equate Nancy and Eve? Eve just wants to
oh,
live. Nancy's trying to control her. The left views the right as trying to control them and oppress them. And so they're not morally equivalent. And my point is always, I'm not making a point that they're morally equivalent.
yeah.
That's for you to decide, okay? If you want to. I'm
Mm.
saying morally judging them is not effective. It's
Yeah.
just not going to produce the world that you want. So, it's just really effective to hear them out, to take
Yeah.
their concerns seriously, even if you think that it's not fair. But you'll then create the world you want. And if you don't do that, if you poo-poo them, even if they're wrong, you believe they're completely wrong, and you think that,
Hmm.
there is good and evil, and they are completely the evil one, you are going to exacerbate their evil by morally rebuking them. And I want to say that like as clearly as possible. I haven't made this point enough on the show. I'm really kind of building a base before I go into more sophisticated, what I would consider a more nuanced philosophy. But if you judge somebody, it is the greatest threat to a human being. You, just understand that we evolved in groups, and moral judgment was the way we got kicked out of groups. If you were a bad person, you were gone, you were dead. And so all of us respond very, very negatively to being judged as selfish. I've had clients threaten to kill each other. Not as powerful as when person calls another person selfish. That is a knife at someone's neck. And so if you want to motivate your enemy, call them a name, call them a racist, see what happens. You think that's effective in convincing them of anything? You're building a war. and you're building your own resistance. And so I'm not saying they're morally equivalent to two sides. I'm saying people are creating their own hell.
So powerful. I completely agree. I observe that as well. Like it's so amazing when you call people, oh, that's you're immoral, you're racist, like goes to their core values, goes to their own identity, right? And I think the thought process might be like, am I not worthy? Am I not lovable? Am I not going to be accepted? Am I going to get rejected, like you said, from the community, right? And so that's why people will go into defensive mode, is because
Immediately.
it
Any of us will.
immediately, yeah,
Yeah. There's no
absolutely.
human being who won't. There may be some people who can regulate it themselves, calm down, try to hear, but there's no person who won't view that as a knife at the neck.
Yeah, agreed. Have you ever had an episode that didn't go as planned?
Yeah.
What did you learn?
The guns episode didn't go as I planned. I mean,
Mm.
I don't, did you see that one by any chance?
No, I don't think I saw that one. No.
It's these two women. It is unbelievably powerful beginning. These two women both grew up in terrible situations where they
Mm.
saw family members get shot. One woman
Yeah.
saw, saw her brother get shot in the head and was holding him as he was saying, "Don't let me die." And the other
Mm.
woman, her dad was shot, and then she believed she was facing home invaders, and she was protecting her brother by putting her body over his. I mean, both of them had very similar upbringings and really tragic. And they went in different directions. One
Yeah.
ended up being a gun advocate, believing that guns are necessary because the police aren't going to come, no one's going to protect us. And the other one believes that guns do incredible damage to societies and that they're a cause of terrible pain. And so they started out telling their story, they arguing, and it was pretty dramatic. And then they go to this next stage where they're understanding each other, telling their personal stories, and it looks like they're really developing empathy. But one of the women, who is an incredible person, she's dedicated her entire life essentially to helping people whose kids were killed heal from that pain and for advocating for
Wow.
them. She could not believe in the goodness of the other side even though they had such similar backgrounds. She was just
Mm.
like constantly like, I don't believe you. I don't believe you're interested in human life. She was expressing her doubt for the other person. And after they shared this really incredibly warm or powerful stories of their childhood, and the other person said, I just feel this relational empathy. We've been through so much together. And the other one was like, really? I don't think of you as a bad person now. It was just so that level of, and I can understand how she ends up here, how she
Mm.
doesn't trust the other side at all. But she did not get to the place where she was really trusting the other person. And so the woman who was trying, the pro-gun person who was really trying, eventually said in her own mind, I'm done. Like I've tried really hard. And I didn't really see this going on. I thought that was going great. But then I could see, like in the identity confusion, when I had them switch roles, it wasn't going as well as I thought. Like, it was
Mm.
kind of cordial. Now it turns out that the pro-gun woman did a really good job of trying in the identity confusion part, and the woman who is anti-guns felt really well understood. And so then she flipped and really felt like they were making progress and felt really warmly to the other person, but the other woman was done. So it was a series of rejection back and forth.
Mm.
And in some ways, you
Mhm.
might say, oh, this is not really relevant to our national politics. This is really
Mm.
personal between them that I couldn't get them to deeply empathize with each other. I mean, it was cordial at the end, but it wasn't warm. But it does show to me how fragile our empathy for each other is because we have these deep ideas about the other side that are so hard
Mm.
to unravel, and that as soon as we feel judged by the other side, but it's happening individually in our own personal psychology, that as soon
Mm.
as we believe we're judged by the other side, we freaking can't stand them. And we
Yeah.
consider them a threat.
Mhm.
Like Hillary Clinton, from my perspective, lost the election when she called Republicans the basket of deplorables. That's a threat that is so deep you will hate the person who said that. Called the middle of the country flyover country. Ah, it's funny. People on the East and West Coast, we call it flyover country. That is a freaking threat.
Yeah.
They will not forgive you for that. And you wouldn't forgive them either by dismissing them, by being dismissed like that.
Hmm.
So that these two women experienced this rejection back and forth and couldn't come to understanding in some ways is very personal and in some ways is just like that's the reality. And our differences are not as much about policy as they are about believing the other side is bad. And what we hear is that them saying bad things about us, and that's going to make us infuriated and convince us that they are evil and that we must follow whatever leader is on our side to defeat those really those evil people.
Yeah. Thank you for that. The majority of your conversations are about 3.5 to 5 hours, I saw, with a mediator, obviously, that has had 20 years of like mediation experience. What are some practical tools listeners can use to create a space when engaging in difficult or divisive topics?
I think that it depends whether we're talking about politics or we're talking about something in our personal lives. Because in our personal lives, very often we do need solutions.
Mm, hmm.
Politics, we don't with the other person. And so I
Mm,
think that listening, like just realizing what the goal is here, which is to maintain my relationship with you, that is more important than solving national issues between the two of us is
hmm.
a really good place to start. And then if you can get yourself to being really curious, like, wow, you are a freaking puzzle. I want to understand you. Like, I'm not going to try and convince you. You are a puzzle that I want to understand. And I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to ask you questions like, well, if you believe that, why don't you believe this? That's a persuasion. People have to understand that in themselves, that they're trying to persuade and they're judging the other person in that moment. If you ask it as, that's really interesting. I want to understand what seems to me to be some difference between your two positions, but I really want to understand it because I know there's a reason. That's different. And so if you can get yourself to really not think that you have to come to a conclusion, but that you're just trying to understand them, they're going to move toward you. Don't try to solve the issue. That's my thought. Like just don't even try to solve it. There's what's going to happen if the two of you solve the abortion issue? Oh, we have a solution. Like who is going to listen to you? No
Mm,
one.
mm,
Now, in terms of personal relationships, it very often we need a solution. And
mm.
so listening does do a lot because sometimes it's just like we are in our personal relationships not feeling understood and we feel judged and unappreciated. So that
Yeah.
is key as well.
Hmm.
The hard part in the personal relationship thing is that with somebody on a political issue, what if they don't reciprocate? So I listen to you and you don't reciprocate and you don't listen to me. I can handle that. Like I learned a lot. I know that you move toward me. I know that you feel better about me, actually. But it gets pretty tiring if you're the one who's listening in a personal relationship and the other person's judging you and doesn't participate in that way. And
Yeah.
I don't know what the solution is to that if it endures for a
Mhm.
very, very long time, because it does take two people to have a healthy relationship. But it's very likely that you're caught in what I call the enemy dance in the personal relationship where both people feel threatened. I didn't go into this but it's like the critical piece, which is called the enemy trance, the critical psychological piece. When we feel threatened, any human being, our empathy for the other side shuts down. It's adaptive. You're not going to feel empathy for somebody who's pointing a gun at your head. You want to defeat them. And
Mm.
so it's adaptive that our empathy shuts down. And once our empathy shuts down, it's really interesting what happens. Not only do we not care about the other side, like not only am I willing to punch the guy in the face who's pointing a gun at me, I actually lose my ability to understand what's going on inside of him. Because without empathy, we can't feel what they're feeling. And most of our understanding of other human beings is unconscious. We're mirroring them in some way. We're feeling what they feel. It's not a conscious process. And so
Yeah.
when empathy shuts down, when you threaten me, I'm in this place where I don't even understand you and I think that you're a bad person. I'm left with no understanding except that you're intending to do this to me. That's my understanding. You want me to suffer. You want to hurt me. You want to control me. That's what people conclude in personal relationships all the time. And it's happening both ways. Both people are caught in the
Mhm.
enemy trance, and then they start dancing this dance where it's confirmed over time. And maybe you can get understand that if the other person thinks bad things about you, almost definitely they see you as a threat. And so the empathy inside of them shut down and they can't understand you. Like they have no control over that. That's what happened. They're caught in
Mm.
that. And so maybe you can restart the system by understanding them, that you can rekindle the relationship by expressing some warmth and really just understanding them without judgment. And maybe you can.
Yeah. I really like what you said. I've said that to my kids before that the relationship has to be more important than being right, right?
Mm,
Like it has to be more important.
yeah.
Just yeah. And then the other part is as well that to me, like listening without judgment really is the stepping stone to compassion, right? Like we can't have compassion for other people if we don't really understand them or understand their story. And so it enables us to connect to that aspect of ourselves,
Hmm.
which I think is critical.
Yeah.
What does success look like for the enemy's project, both short term or long term?
So there's success, which is that it's a project, and success for a documentary series has certain markers. But that I'm not doing this because I want to be in the entertainment world or because I care about, number of people who watch or something like that. Success for me means actually having an impact on politics and that our ability to work together in society and between cultures, between societies. That's
Mm, yeah.
success. Right? That's a really long and ambitious goal. But the way that we get there, from my perspective, is yes, these shows are watched. And, right now, maybe millions have seen them, but it's a blip in the ocean. It's a little ripple in the ocean of vitriol. And it's true that I'm very grateful to have an impact on individuals where they can look at life with hope. But ultimately, if I'm judging the success of the project, I want there to be a tidal wave, not not just one tiny little voice with all this hatred everywhere. And there are at least two ways that I'm seeing that happen. One is that these conversations that we're hosting, where 50 million people are watching, where it's Mark Ruffalo and Mel Gibson, where it's cultural icons who represent our proxies for this deep misunderstanding and who believe the other side is bad. And there's not just one of those, there's many of those where we're having cultural conversations where we come to the conclusion that we are being manipulated. We are actually brothers and sisters. I think that has a transforming effect on American politics if we can raise it to that level. The other way that I see an effect is that we are going to be starting an effort to have this in every high school that people watch these episodes and essentially go through a process where they go through an identity confusion process with the other side and where they learn a different way of interacting with the other side where it's not debate. What we're being taught is to debate and to defeat ideas. And it's
Mm,
completely, excuse my language, ass backwards in terms of persuasion.
yeah.
It never works. And so that the goal is to be in every high school in the country where they do this for a week in different classes, and that in every college, a political science department has a class on something like this. And, we're developing relationships where that actually can be realistic. So it's to affect millions, tens of millions of people. I mean, the interesting thing in society is that a lot of research shows that if you convince the middle 3.5% of something, society follows. And so you don't need to convince everybody. A movement like this needs, in the United States, 30 million people, 20 million people to really feel passionately about this, and it affects politics. Politicians, in my view, don't lead, they follow. And it's not wise right now to work with the other side. And my goal is to change that.
Mm. Yeah. And I like how you are focusing on young people because really that's the generation that is going to grow up. That's the generation that is looking to do things differently. I don't want a blanket statement, everyone, right? There are older people that want to do something different as well.
Seen as the effects of your efforts in school.
Thank you for asking that question. So I've seen actually some shifts in people. So one of the things I've seen, it's interesting to even observe it in a paper because the way that I do it on purpose so that people won't try to debate. Because before I thought maybe have them interview someone, because interviewing is part of like research, right? And I'm like, they can't, some of my students just can't hold that. So I'm like, that's too much. I have to scale it down. So for them, I'm like, find credible sources of an opposing perspective. Give me your view, then give me what are the opposing perspective, what are their views, why do they believe what they believe, and are you really opposing, right? And then talk to me about your feelings and emotions and what came up. And sometimes you'll see in the middle of the paper where they have to do the opposing views, they will debate in that paper. You will see them go like they'll
Yeah.
give a little bit of the opposing perspective, and then I'll push back and go, no, just give me what the opposing perspective is. And I get lots of thank yous. I get lots of thank yous, even from people that were really challenged. Is that also is part of their role? So I teach social workers, right? And so social workers are supposed to, if you look at the code of social workers, you have to make sure that everyone has their perspective supported and respected, that we treat all people with respect. It's part of the code. So that's my justification. You've got to be able to hold those perspectives. Because what if you work with someone who believes in white supremacy and you are their clinical counselor? What are you going to do? How are you going to manage that? How, like, what needs to happen? And so what I see with students is I see lots of gratitude. Some people will shift. They will actually say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that we're not really that opposite. Like that they will hear people on podcasts, but again, it has to be credible. I don't want my students to be exposed to trolls because I won't be there to help them manage those difficult conversations. And so I say, find credible sources of people. Like your show would be a credible source, right? You're from UCLA, you're a lawyer, you're a mediator. And so I say, find credible sources and listen to the other perspective. So I've seen some students completely shift. Other students say, I haven't changed my perspective, but I can understand why they believe what they do.
Hmm. Which
And
is a big
so,
deal. Yeah.
yeah, and some students aren't there. I've had students who, like, God bless them, because that's the most they can give. So instead of going to an opposing perspective, like, let's say they have this perspective they feel strongly about, they'll move this way. The opposing perspective is like, they'll move just an inch. And I'm like, this is not an opposing perspective. And they can't hold it. Like, I'll push back and say, let's talk about what you might perceive as an opposing perspective. And it doesn't compute. It really doesn't. And for them even just looking this little far is enough, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's what
Yeah.
you can hold. And so that's what I've seen. I've gotten lots of like positive
Mm.
feedback around the assignments. I was a little nervous in the beginning,
Yeah.
very nervous, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this and see how it goes. And however it goes, it goes. And I've had nothing but positive feedback. That's why I expanded it. I only was doing it in one course. And then I expanded it to so my master's students and my bachelor students both do these assignments. Yeah.
Wow, that's really neat.
It
I like
really is quite cool. And so, I totally support having this engaging in this dialogue in high school and with students. I
that.
think is so important for them to be able to understand that we're not as divided as we think we are. Not the core. We are really, really all human beings. And we've forgotten, each other's humanity. And the other shift too is that we need to be able to have conversations together. Like everybody's constantly canceling one another. And that only causes more division. So how can we come closer together? So
It's crazy. I mean, it really is a crazy way to run a society, except nobody's running it. All the stuff that's popular, I don't know if you're familiar with the show Jubilee, but it's
no.
basically the anti-enemies project. I mean, it is like they pit people who are the
Mm.
opposites against each other and they fight. And they've been
Mm.
out there for like, I don't know, 7 years, and they have like 10 million subscribers, and they just beat the crap out of each other. And that's what kids are watching. And they're just cheering their side on. And
It
that's
just
the education
reinforces
that
what they
yeah,
believe. Yeah, people want
and it's the
reinforcement. That's why
education they're getting.
Yeah, that's why, like, for that part of the paper where I say, give me the opposing perspectives,
Mhm.
it's basically like put yourself in their shoes, but not really. Just tell me what their points are. Just list what their points are and why they believe what they do. And that does have a bit of a brain tweak because they have to put themselves, like, have to understand their perspective so that they can
Absolutely.
write about it.
I mean, there's been
Yeah.
this research done with lawyers that show that lawyers will take any position
Yeah.
because they're hired by a side and
Yeah.
they come to believe it. But they've shown that if they simply are hired by somebody else, they'll actually believe the others. They'll actually believe it. Like they won't just like, it's like argue the side. They'll believe it. And you can get people to believe either side of it, pretty much anything. Where they start is a big deal. The,
Hmm.
the,
Yeah.
the one that you tell them they're advocating for first has a bigger impact on them than the one
Mm,
they're advocating for second. But it's like we're completely shiftable. Like we can just do
valuable.
either one. We can just have this belief or that belief, and then we can play the role.
That's why I love that your show flips it, right? Like sit in each other's shoes and each other's perspectives and just be able to vocalize. I love how people were able to kind of do that. I was like, wow, like I was so impressed.
I
People's ability. Yeah.
I mean, and I said this before, but I didn't tell you that when I do identity shifting for people in clients, I have them argue for a solution, like find solutions as the other person. I mean,
Mm,
it is so freaking confusing to them. It is, they
yeah.
have no idea who they are. They have no idea what's going on, but as the other person, they come up with stuff. It's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah. I saw that in your show. Like some people were coming up with things they hadn't said before, but was even a better way to vocalize. I'm like, they heard, they were listening. Oh, it's just such an amazing show.
Thanks.
Okay, a couple of more questions, just wrapping it up. So, for this season, I'm asking all of my guests what their definition of self love is.
Oh gosh, that's such a powerful question. I wish I had an easy answer to that definition. I would say that for me is what makes me the most happy. And that is really dialing down for myself. I'm a very analytical person. I'm a really like a philosophical person who did really well in law school because I that's the way my mind thinks.
Yeah.
And it doesn't bring me a lot of happiness to think through issues all the time and always be solving problems. So just being present. And
Mm,
I mean that like when I'm walking down the street, I'm really making sure that I'm not solving any issue.
I
That
like
is
that.
for me the deepest happiness.
Oh, mm, true presence is love. Oh, yeah. Last question. Where can people find you? Where can people work with you?
I'm right here.
When's the book coming out?
So it's the Enemies Project on YouTube. We also are on social media. TheEnemiesProject.org is the website, and you can read a lot about us. The book is coming out. It's interesting because I started the Enemies Project in part because I wanted a vehicle for the book. Um,
Nice. Okay.
and I submitted it to a few agents. I didn't get any responses. I mean, they didn't look at it. They didn't look at my letter. And I was just like, I need to be well known first.
Mm,
The book is something I worked on for 10 years. And from my standpoint, it is more powerful than the Enemies Project.
wow.
That's my
Say a
view.
little bit. Can you say a little bit more about it or no?
Yeah, it's called The Enemy Dance. And it's the story of an orphan, Akbar, who is born 500 years ago or so in a mythical land called the Himbala, which is a mountainous region where Hindus, Muslims, and Buddhists are at war forever.
Mm,
And he is born to Muslims and is brought up in a Hindu village by an old woman, and he is abused. He is rejected because he is Muslim among Hindus.
yeah.
And it's his effort to try to create peace in this area that has never known peace because he wants acceptance. And it becomes the story of those people who want the same as him from land to land and their effort to transform this world and whether it's possible.
Mm,
Um,
that's beautiful.
and my view is
Okay.
that nobody or almost nobody is interested in education. And you probably are because you're an academic and probably a highly philosophical, intellectual person. But most people aren't interested in education. Very few. They're interested in entertainment. And that education has to ride the tails of entertainment in order to be effective. And so I wrote a novel which I considered to be, my best work and contained all of the philosophy. And I worked on it for a very long time. And so now that I have probably an audience, it's not quite big enough yet, but hopefully will be within 6 months or so. We have 500,000 followers or something like that. I probably won't even seek a publisher at that point. I'll self-publish, and it
Yeah.
is for me, my life's work. We'll see
Mm,
what happens with it.
wow.
We'll see.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
in because it could be a movie. There's lots of exciting possibilities.
maybe, but
Yeah.
that,
Well, you know what
that
I thought about is I thought about the Hunger Games. The books like Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, they were commentaries about society, commentaries about people, commentaries about separation and mental health and all of those things. People are more receptive to, then it's almost as if it gets through the facade of like the right and wrong through entertainment to education. And
yeah,
that's been used. Think about it. One of the things I think you said in your TEDx. Yeah, you talked in your TEDx that we can only win if we defeat the other side mentality is causing division. What I thought about is look at movies. The good guys use the same strategy. The good guys still kill, still punish, still want revenge. Like, so even our perspectives of who the good guy is, it's the same strategy that they're using, which is that punishment. You're helping us move away from that. How can we move away from that perspective and come closer together and not see each other as enemies?
yeah. And I can see that there are a lot of different ways to promote that world, and you're doing that by bringing on your show lots of people who kind of share this philosophy and are going about it in different ways.
Thank you so much for being on the show. This was incredible. And thank you for staying with me for almost 2 hours and answering all
Hey,
my questions. And
you're
thank you to
welcome.
everyone who tuned in for another episode of the Love and Compassion podcast with Giselle. See you soon.